So, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's just get started this session on financing circular economy. My name is Timo Mäkelä, and I'm a senior advisor of Finnish Innovation Fund, and I'm going to moderate this session. But to start with, let me actually remind us why we are here, actually, why we are talking about the financing, and just kind of a build on what we heard already this morning. So we are living in the world where we know that during next 20 years, I mean up to 2040, 2050, the demand for energy will grow 30%. Demand of metals will grow 60%. Demand of water will go 140%. And we will need more, 200% more arable land that is available now, business as usual model. At the same time, we know that 70% of ecosystems are degraded or under threat. The very ecosystems that are supposed to produce this growth of the use. And now coming to the circular economy, just few facts, further facts. Out of our car fleet, the use rate is 8%, so they stand 92% idle. Out of our materials, consumption goods materials, we throw away 80%. Only 20% is reused, practically used once, and that's it, throwaway economy. Our office space is used 40%, so 60% is empty on average. And we throw away or we waste our food, 1/3 of our food. So this is the world we are actually living in. And of course, we heard this morning that there is a need for transition to more circular economy. There's a need for paradigm change. And of course, this session is going to look at whether or not and how financing sector can respond to this paradigm change, or whether there's a need to change also in the financing. We actually have 5 panelists, or 2 keynote speakers and 3 panelists from different spheres of financing and also from business. And of course, I will invite actually first the keynote speakers, and I will actually make maybe a couple of questions to them after their speech, and then invite everybody, and after their initial statements, we launch the discussion. I actually would want to structure then the panel discussion in 2 parts. First of all, looking at how the existing mainstream financing institutions, instruments can respond to the financing of circular economy, or what actually the policy makers, business need to understand to get financing from traditional financing sources. And of course, then in the second part of the second keynote, we would actually then discuss on whether there are new ways of financing, of course, complementing the existing ones. In particular, looking at impact investments as a new way forward to secure the performance of investments, but also the other types of investments, such as green bonds, for instance. In a sense, and I will raise a few questions with the panel. So this is more or less the agenda for this 1.5 hours. And I don't know if there's some time, there are no microphones, but I think this is small enough room, so I can also take some questions from the audience, if basically time allows. But let's get on going, and I would want to invite already in the opening sessions, we heard of Madame Ishii to give her perspective. Madame Ishii is, of course, the chairman and CEO of Global Environmental Fund, a very substantial global funding instrument. But now, Ki, the floor is yours. I think you have to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me for this session, and thank you so much for very, very challenging topic to how to finance the circular economy. Before we discuss that and how to finance the circular economy, we may actually need to confirm ourselves that what is exactly the circular economy we were talking about. And if you just give me 1 minute that then, to spare with you, that then, in my view, which I already mentioned this morning, in my view, the circular economy is basically a blueprint to transform our key economic system so that we can stay within the safe planetary operating space or planetary boundaries. So in order for us to stay within that planetary boundaries, basically we need to really transform our current economic system, meaning that how to make a transition to energy system, decarbonize ourselves, how to make our city more livable, and how to fix that our food system, food and land use system, which is basically the major destroyer of the global environment. And what we want to do is we want to move on to that more circular economy, meaning that how to bring that consumption and production to be much more circular. So we were really talking about the very big thing, that how to change our current economic system. So that's why it's so challenging to think about how finance really can catalyze this system change. But I also said in the morning, I'm quite optimistic about it for 3 reasons. Number one, let me repeat. Number one, science tells us very, very clearly, also that the moderator already shared some numbers, that the science tells us we need to move on. We have no other choice. So it's number one. The number two, actually that it's actually entirely possible. In fact, that the business already see a lot of opportunities, and then the price of the natural resources going up and reflecting that the scarcity of those resources. And there are a lot of good investment opportunities, business opportunities already popping up. And the third reason why I'm optimistic is that now the consumers, the demand is changing. It's much more desirable, they think. So that if you just hear to the younger generation today, their preference is already so different that to own the good is not necessarily the most cool thing. They much prefer to actually to use the service. So this changing from owning to using, and from consumer point of view, create a lot of good demand. So for those 3 reasons, I'm fundamentally optimistic about we are able to move on to the circular economy. But if the question is how that the system, financial system, can catalyze this system change, it's become a little bit of complicating. So that I want to maybe spend, say 2 things at the very high end of financial system as it is, how the financial system as a whole can move to, actually can catalyze the system change, that's one. But the second thing is, are there any good example that a technique or instrument to really support things on the ground? So let me start with this high end, the topic of how the financial sector can take on this challenge of moving to circular economy. I think there are maybe 2 good examples we could learn. The one is that when the climate finance and the task force on the climate-related and financial disclosure, or TCFD, is actually pushing that they are pushing to how the financial system can incorporate risk of doing that or not doing that climate change and response, so that there is some kind of initiative already have started to take the system risk opportunity to take into the financial sector. So that's definitely one thing which I thought that things are moving forward. But another interesting example would be that this movement or enthusiasm about an ESG investment. That's another very interesting phenomena I would like to focus on. There are 3 phases of this ESG that how that the investment can take care of that environment, social, and economic and the governance aspect. Maybe 10 years ago, that the sustainability is more like a cost. It's something good to have, but it's more like a cost. Maybe that in a few years later, that the sustainability and profitability can go maybe hand in hand, so that there is some kind of progress. But the last phase which we are in is more like sustainability is the only way for company and economy to make a profit, at least the longer run. So we have seen this journey from cost to more like an option or neutrality toward much of the necessity. So that when I see this transition, the journey of the ESG, I actually see this quite a hope that the financial sector can make the same kind of journey for circular economy. So it's more like my reflection of how the financial system as a whole can take on this agenda. But I think today's expectation, at least from moderator, is can we talk a little bit about concrete example and how to leverage the private investment into this circular economy. So I may actually share with you maybe 3 examples that the GEF has been funding and then in terms of circular economy. As I mentioned that today, that for the last 2 years, I see the huge change even within the GEF portfolio. 2 years ago, when I proposed that the GEF should fund circular economy, absolutely no interest, or I would say that there is a reluctance or hesitation. What does it really mean? For the last 2 years, there is a huge demand, particularly actually coming from Asia and Africa, that they would like to see some kind of circular economy project. So I see that quite a good demand. It's kind of amounting to the surface. So that the 3 things we have been doing. One is that how to spur the innovation, and then the innovation sometimes that need a kind of some sunk time or sunk cost, so that here to encourage that the government and the policymakers and to create the opportunity for innovation, we actually try to fund a little bit of de-risking or to play a role of patient capital. So definitely there is one role that how to finance the innovation. So the second role is actually to work with the government to help create a better regulation, the policy options, so that they can kind of assure that the market for business. So this is actually that doing, we have been doing that with some government already. But the third one I really think it's maybe most important is how to create more like a multi-stakeholder coalition, because that when we talk about system change, it's not really a simple thing, that you really need to bring that the government, the policymakers, that the business, the consumers together to create an incentive, and they actually need to move on together. Today we talk a lot about plastics, but how to do the plastics. But in order for us to go beyond 3R and to think about the design and to rethink the design, that you need to bring the all key players along the plastic supply chain together, and to see that how to reduce the number of plastics that are used in the current economy, so that it's not really a simple thing. And so that the one thing that which Jeff has been doing is to how to help this kind of coalition, multi-stake coalition, to create real business needs and the real, actually the long-term the investment opportunity. That's something that we have been doing in terms of that plastic, but also some other sectoral work. And if I may just do one thing, that we, the GF, is a part of the PACE. It's a platform accelerating circular economy. That the idea, that together with World Economic Forum and some of the business sector, and today I hear that the Japanese government actually joining the PACE. The purpose of this kind of platform is basically to create the coalition that from business to policymakers to CSOs to financial sector together to really create actually that concretize the business opportunity so that we can really move on to the circular economy. So that may be that my maybe 5 minutes is already over, but very, very happy to be here. Let's, thank you so much.
Thank you, Naoko. Maybe you can stay there for a while and then I actually lead you to sit there because I would want to make you a couple of questions. Or maybe you can actually take the seat over here. And just to kind of so in a sense, you seem to send quite an optimistic, actually, message that financing world needs to also adapt gradually. I mean, this is what I read from your presentation, and then you basically told examples of the GEF activities, and also, as we heard already in the plenary in the morning, that there is a considerable change of the attitudes of the governments to the circular economy of your clients. So my kind of a question, I mean, thinking of the audience here now, and if somebody has now in mind, you know, and I have a wonderful program somewhere in your countries that would actually then address the plastic issue, and then even business potential, I mean, how does that go? Maybe you can explain a bit more in detail. I mean, how does CHEF operate? I mean, do you discuss with the governments or do you kind of also want to hear from the clients? I mean, tell us a bit more about, you know, how you basically, how these projects come about.
Actually, the plastic is a wonderful example because when you think about plastic, maybe first thing you think about is marine plastic or the plastic bag actually floating in the ocean, how to clean up. That may be, actually, that's why that the last week I was with Environmental Minister Thailand and Indonesia, they all want to clean up their coast. So that then what they have been talking about the waste management, how to create this river basin approach along the major rivers which basically flow the plastic, and they have been creating some kind of coalition about the big business along them, around that river. So we can help that kind of thing, but and it has been already kind of, you know, possible that the product line. But what I really want to emphasize is that is really not good enough. That we need to find a way to move from 3R to 5R, that the redesign and the rethink. And that's why I'm much more interested in, if I may be very honest with you, that how we can create a business coalition to reduce the number of plastics. That right now there are so many number of plastics I even don't remember, and that really prohibit that us from doing what they are doing, this recycling of the plastic. And I understand that some kind of coalition, the protocol has already emerged, so they have making some progress, but it really needs a lot of effort to bring all stakeholders together, and they have to actually flip the system at the same time. Otherwise, there are so many leakages. So that how that the GF institution, like public institution like us, can support that kind of multi-stakeholder coalition to move from one system to another. So that that is actually that will be our prime focus, that the multi-stakeholder coalition. Besides, or in addition to something we have been already doing, working with the government with the waste management plan, how to clean up shore, or how to team up with the business sector along the river basin, so that it's kind of, you know, already tested some ideas to kind of new business model. So there are quite a range of things we can do. Again, the system change is such a complicated thing. We have become a bit of victim of stalemate, system stalemate. How to get out of here is basically to bring every stakeholder together to move on.
Thank you. So in a sense, you would want to see a system change rather than individual projects, small things, and perhaps creating then through these stakeholder coalitions a market for others then to start financing. Okay, thank you, Naoko, and please sit down. I will come back to you with a few other questions later, because and just take your seat. And of course, then I would actually invite now the The second keynote speaker, Mika Pyykkö, who is a director in the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, and has been actually focusing in Sitra on kind of a new way of financing. I understand that it is about really securing the performance of the financing as well, which is called impact financing. So this is, if you like, a new approach, and Mika will tell us a bit more what this is all about and perhaps also how it fits to the circular economy. Mika, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Before I start, one warning and one disclaimer. And warning is that I was here in Japan for the first time about 35 years ago for practicing table tennis with Okimura-san. I was playing in our national team at that time, and after every day we were practicing here, we went to the dinner with our Japanese partners and sometimes with Chinese partners, other players. And when we finished our dinner, I was given the microphone and asked to sing. And because of that, I always, when I see microphone in Japan, I have a feeling that I have to start to sing. But don't be too scared. I don't do this time. Maybe that would be better than my presentation, you think so? But anyway, thanks. And the disclaimer is that I would give you the very general and very brief description about impact investing. I don't focus on circular economy and that kind of things at all, because I think that you are much more clever to do that. And afterwards we can discuss, of course, what the impact investing and impact and the circular economy has to do together. So we got advice that in this session we have to focus on SDGs 3, 8, and 6, but I want to show this picture particularly that I think that when we are talking about this kind of big issues, we almost always have to focus also on cooperation and partnership between different stakeholders and different actors. That's that I want to remind us also the SDGs 17. And then about impact investing. Impact investing means that private investments are allocated intentionally to projects and or companies or organizations who gives you financial return, but at the same time they achieve some benefits in terms of well-being or environmental questions. So from traditional investors' point of view, you are thinking mostly about return, financial return, and risk. But when you are talking about impact investing, there is also the third dimension that you really want to achieve something beneficial in terms of society, in terms of well-being, in terms of environmental questions. So you can call impact investing responsible investment 2.0. So when we are talking about responsible investment, you are screening and taking out that kind of harmful targets, for example, alcohol, arms, and that kind of things. But when you are talking about impact investing, you actually want to achieve something good in terms of society or in terms of environmental questions. So you can call impact investment also responsible investment 2.0. And globally, impact investing has been that kind of, let's say, movement since 2008, when Rockefeller Foundation organized that kind of big meeting, and the question of that meeting was what private investors can do in the different way in terms of sustainable development and sustainable development in a global world. And after that meeting, about 10 years ago, that market seems to grow very rapidly. Last year, it's estimated to be something like $250 billion US dollars, and as I mentioned, it seems to grow very rapidly. And impact investors are involved into sectors like energy, housing, food, agriculture, and more all possible sectors globally. And in fact, there was a global impact investing summer 2018, about 2 weeks ago in New Delhi, and there were more than 900 people, but I'm afraid that no one of you were there. Oh, were one of you there? No. And I can already now point out that this is one of our problems. I think we were talking about circular economy there in New Delhi. And we were talking about how much money our investors have to allocate to some impact investing target, but people like you who are really working with circular economy, you were not there. It was somehow that kind of, how do you say, one sectoral discussion. But anyway, during the summit, there were, for example, Mr. Al Gore, who said that potential sustainability revolution is very obvious. Then after his speech, there were launch of environmental outcomes funds about $1 billion US. We don't know yet what that outcome fund will mean, but anyway, from my point of view, this could be one possibility also for circular economy. And then there was also a result-based approach in the title of my presentation, and now very briefly about that. That is the way how we in Sitra very much talk about impact investing and the possibilities of private investors in this field. When we are talking about results-based approach or outcomes-based approach, there are three main partners. They are commissioner, investors, and of course service providers. And commissioners is in charge of determine the phenomenon demand of positive change in our society or your society. And a commissioner is also in charge of verify quantitative and economic development inside that phenomenon, and what are those possibilities for positive change. What is the value of positive change in terms of, for example, quality of life or environmental perspective, and what is the value, economical value of that kind of possible positive changes. And at the same time, the commissioner, who very often use taxpayers' money, determine how much it is ready to pay for this kind of positive changes. And then there are service providers who run that kind of innovative service solutions in order to achieve those goals which are set together the commissioner. And then there are investors who bear the financial risk, who are funding those service providers, and investors bear the financial risk as mentioned, because they get money and the possible return back only if those goals are achieved. If service providers don't achieve those goals, investors lose their money. And there are different kind of instruments in terms of outcome-based approach, social impact bonds, environmental impact bonds, and development impact bonds. And in all those instruments, it's typical that there's a commissioner who is normally the public sector entity who is using taxpayers' money, or in development impact bond like World Bank, and they are private investors who bear the financial risk, and they are best possible service providers. And here you can see the list or reasons why we, for example, in Sitra has focused very much on this approach. First of all, we really want to take care of taxpayers' money. We want to see that taxpayers' money is always used only if needed positive changes are achieved. Not like taxpayers' money are used nowadays, that those money are budgeting to different kind of activities, and then politicians and civil servants cross their fingers and they really hope that those goals can be achieved without knowing is it sure or not. And taxpayers' money are sometimes lost, a big amount of taxpayers' money. But this is a way to keep taxpayers' money in safe. And when we are talking about using private investors' money, it's possible to make really upfront investments in order to prevent that kind of problems in terms of well-being or in terms of environmental questions, which seems to be very difficult to avoid by that kind of normal budgeting system, which is normally sees only 1 year or max 4 years period. And this is my last slides. As a Sitra's impact investing team, as I already mentioned, that we really believe that if we want to make that kind of major positive changes, that have to be based on co-creation and collaboration. And Sir Ronald Cohen, who has ex-venture capitalist and nowadays a grand old man of impact investing market, he has said that it is possible to do well and to do good at the same time. To do well and do good at the same time. And let's act now. There's never been a greater need or a better time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mika. So also for you, you can actually take the next chair there. I mean, just kind of a couple of questions, or one question from my side. So the first of all, actually, I would want to refer to Nauko's Jeff Assembly and Paul Bowman, who made a very powerful, Paul Bowman is CEO of the Unilever. And I think I remember he made a very powerful statement there that was basically telling that that if the companies, if the businesses cannot do any good for the society, we don't need them and they can go. I remember that statement very, very well. But I mean, coming to this impact investing, did I understand correctly that it's basically best fit for using public sector money to mobilize those who are interested in investing from the private sector? Is this something, first of all, how would you say this fits actually to the circular economy? Because that has not been yet the focus of impact financing.
As you know that I don't work every day with circular economy, despite that my colleagues who are working with this issue are sitting 5 meters from me. So it's easy for me to answer that I really see the huge potential in terms of impact investing and circular economy to combine those two perspectives. Because impact investing is not, let's say, only how to combine public and private money. It's the way of thinking, and I think that there are more and more investors who really want to achieve something more than just financial return. So that kind of market and that kind of attitude is growing globally, and those people really want to achieve something good also in terms of environmental questions, and then we come to the circular economy and this kind of possibilities.
Thank you, Mika. This is then my second question to you is really related to whether this can ever become a mainstream, because in a sense, in the ruthless financing world, I mean, financiers are looking for returns, quick returns with little risk, and you say that this type of a attitude is growing. Can it really grow?
I think that millennials are going to change this game, and after 10 years, we don't talk anymore about impact investing as a special stream. That kind of idea is included to all kind of business. It's necessary.
Okay, thank you. Please have a seat. And let me now invite actually the rest of the panelists to the floor. Of course, Rintaro Tamaki, so he's actually the president of the Japan Center for International Finance, but I understood that also a long OECD background. And then Veronica de la Carde, who is actually representing the panel, a business lady from waste management company from Chile, partner and CEO of Reciclos from Chile. And then Massimiliano Tellini, who is a financier from circular economy and a kind of has been, and will tell us a bit about his institution, who is strategically, if I understood correctly, looking at the financing opportunities in this area. I think what I would actually want to do now is to give you each first a kind of a time for your initial statements, and then I will actually also tease you and also the others with few questions. So perhaps starting with Rintaro, and perhaps you could kind of give your initial statement for the panelists.
Initial statement. I like to stress the point Naoko indicated, that this is another issue. Another issues to be discussed in terms of social and economic transformation of the system. The system is now changing. So this is a quite similar issue to be dealt with along with decarbonization, for example. In discussing financing circular economy, we have many common issues, many common challenges as other transformation, systemic transformation issues. This is the first. Then Timo asked how to see the potential for traditional financier, like banks and public sectors financing could behave to assist these systemic changes. I am not very optimistic in the role of banking sector. Many reasons, but quite a few. First, they are in its mindset very conservative. They are not paying relevant attention to the changes, or say, as a mood, emerging mood by millennials. Second, commercial banks, we let them to put on straitjackets, like on a Basel III. And they are working under the very strict supervision by bank regulators. So to move the commercial banks, we have to convince not only the bank management, but also regulators who are so much afraid of the repetition of banking crisis. So they are very, very cautious. And also by nature, commercial banks are providing relatively shorter term of money and are not necessarily fit with the new type of business model, like pay-per-use. Cash flow are different. Cash flows model is totally different from existing lending, borrowing projects. In these aspects, perhaps we can continue more. We cannot count on the banking sector, traditional commercial banking sector, to support the systemic transition to circular economy. Instead, we should count on more long-term investors, which carries $93 trillion in the OECD member countries under their management, like pension funds, insurance companies. They are seeking, by their own mission, to better well-being, better well-being of pensioners and the insurance clients. So they are potentially long-term investor and also seeking the impact on their customers' overall life system. So in that sense, the point of our discussion might be, of course, impact investment is another issue, but our point can be the focus of how to mobilize huge money held by institutional investors to support the transition to circular economy. This is I stop here.
Thank you. I think very important actually messages. So you don't really seem to count too much on commercial banking sector, which in a sense, perhaps by nature is different, as you highlighted, maybe not fit for this purpose. And I think that's an important message, pointing down to the pension funds and insurance companies. I mean, could I actually elaborate a bit further? I mean, what should be done to unleash those funds? Because I know that they are interested in, but still it's not mainstream. And maybe there are some institutional limitations for them to enter into this type of finance. Perhaps if you could elaborate that a bit further.
Yes. We will face many challenging issues. First, pension management, pension funds and the insurance company management have to convince their clients. The issue is the investment would create long-term cash flow, long-term returns. Are you sure? How to convince them? It requires, first of all, data. data of other similar projects. The performance of similar projects would convince their clients, or even before that, is it available? Are these data available for the long-term investors? Secondly, benchmarking. How to measure the impact, or how impact on pushing the society into circular economy, and how to compare with return and impact combination to convince their clients. And also, thirdly, perhaps they are also facing the regulators' problem. Pension funds and insurance company. In the case of insurance company, different from bank regulators, more flexible, I hope. But they are still in the part of traditional banking sector under strict supervision. And pension funds is quite different, but sometimes their regulators are not necessarily looking at the social economic impact of their pension funds activity, but also just looking at the liquidity issues. So these three issues, data, benchmarking, and supervision, regulators issue, these are another set of challenges before us.
I think, thank you. Actually, I have a similar experience, particularly on the third one. So there are regulatory changes are going to be needed for these to operate in a more flexible manner. But I think that's really an important source of resources if we really want to scale up and mainstream. Because of course we can always have pilots, but I mean, what do they really mean in addressing this global challenge? Let me now move to Veronica, and perhaps you can first give your perspective to the topic. Perhaps now looking at it from the business angle, of a business who is in the business of circular economy.
No, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very glad to be speaking here. In representation of the businesses, right? The investees. I work in Triciclos, and Triciclos is a company dedicated to implement circular economy solutions. We are very focused on packaging. So all of our solutions are targeted towards a Unilever, for example. The way I see it is in companies like ourselves, which are almost startups or very innovative business models, of course, patient capital as the one that you can find in impact investing funds, it's very necessary, right? Because you need capital that probably will expect certain returns way further in the future. And we ourselves have 2 impact investing funds as shareholders. And then you can of course start moving towards more traditional funds, more of a venture capitalist that are willing to take more risks. Because of course there's a lot of innovation going on in circular economy, and you need to take a lot of risks in order to actually be able to create new solutions. So that is one part. But on the other hand, I think that a big challenge is to be able to finance or be able to ask big companies like the one that you mentioned, Unilever, for example, to actually them start making certain changes, because they are the ones that have the power to create huge and quick impact in order to really transition towards a circular economy. And when their managers or executives are mandate to actually maximize the shareholders' value, not necessarily in a long run, but actually in a short or middle term, they need to compare themselves with other companies that probably are not necessarily transitioning towards a circular economy. And there are a lot of hidden costs in the linear economy that make them more profitable. than the ones that are willing, and Unilever is one of those cases, willing to actually make a change. So how can the financial market actually manage to, capture these differences and be able to align this risk-return ratio more into all of this new paradigm of a circular economy? It's a huge challenge. And then regarding funding from public sector, I think that a huge impact can be done if those funds are targeted towards consumers, since consumers are the ones that could create a huge impact in deciding or empowering them in order to decide through their purchases whether certain products should move towards a circular economy, and even be able to pay more or differently and prefer those companies that are actually more sustainable or more circular. And so spending a lot of money in educating consumers, I think it's also something that could create a lot of returns in the long run.
Thank you. So you basically are really calling for patient fund, meaning in practice that the returns, I mean, there needs to be an investor who is ready to wait for the returns, which might then be something, very, very profitable. And of course you have to make a business case for sure. But I mean, let me ask you actually this, you kind of highlighted the role of big companies actually, maybe also supporting these innovations because legislative and other requirements somehow require them to pay attention to circular, particularly in the waste sector. I mean, your investors, are they coming directly from you, or have these bigger companies, if you like, your clients, helped to mobilize those investors to your company?
Not necessarily in our case, but probably it could be. In our case, we started as being funded with impact investing funds, so exactly the ones that saw in our mission a potential impact that probably in the middle term or even in the long term could eventually subsidize part of the returns that a normal capital would expect. That said, I know that a lot of these big firms are actually financing solutions to then implement in their own business models. But again, and this is a challenge, and I'm here to maybe make a provoke ourselves on a different level. But when you have executives that they need to maximize shareholders' value in the short and middle term, it's hard to move towards a new paradigm of economy. So.
Okay, I think that and CEOs, of course, they play enormously important role in these companies. My actually second question, perhaps, I mean, if there are, and I think in the audience there are maybe startup or small business representatives, and maybe in somebody's mind is the question that, I mean, how difficult? I mean, sometimes financiers are blamed to be just too difficult. So you have to kind of present all kinds of things, and then they come and control you and kind of suffocate you under the pressure of kind of making sure that their returns are really, or the loans or whatever investments they are covered. So is this an issue for the smaller companies?
It is, and as it is in every sector. It is a challenge, but at the same time, I think it's a huge opportunity because, and this is especially for this sector, because when you have impact investing funds, it's because probably you move in a sector that probably is more informal, so you need to be much more professional probably, and we as investees have an enormous impact on the future of the industry. So we in Triciclos are very aware of the fact that if we create certain metrics that could help future companies to actually get investments, it's a huge, it's something very relevant to us. So we are very organized and in our reporting, even though it is hard. And a lot of my time ends up going to that. But I see it on a positive way. I think it is, at the end, of course, there's probably some funds that are extremely bureaucratic or whatnot, but in general terms, I think it's a good way to measure yourselves, and it's a good way to be very organized and create metrics for the future.
Thank you. And then final intervention is coming from Massimiliano. And perhaps you can tell a bit about your institution, which to my mind it seems to be a very interesting one, and how do you approach this circular economy financing from your perspective?
Absolutely. First of all, again, it's a great pleasure to be with you, and I've been assisting to a very sort of an amazing conversation. If it's possible, then I would like to show the video, which is just highlighting what I'm going to share with you quickly. Let me just, in a sort of very provocative kind of way, say that banking is not cool. I have been understanding this. Otherwise, there are differences. Intesa Sanpaolo is the financial service global partner of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We are the first bank globally believing in the transition to circular economy. But again, I want to be very, very provocative. If I'm going to recycle this bottle, I'm going to be a sustainable kind of guy, which is pretty good. But it's not solving the problem. It's not going to be a good progress towards the circular one. Because this plastic has not been designed to be compostable. That's why by 2050, in the oceans, there will be more plastic than fish. This is what we're talking about. And again, we are not talking about sustainability at all. It's important, it's crucial, it's thanks to the sustainability efforts that we are where we are, but sustainability has been dealing with trying to mitigate the negative externalities of the linear model. We are talking about a different model. We are talking about circular business models. It's about innovation. If I redesign this bottle, I'm going to be circular. This is what finance is doing. That's why we at Intesa Sanpaolo established what we do call Intesa Sanpaolo Innovation Center. I'm in charge of the circular economy, and actually, we, as a commercial bank, put circular economy right at the center of the new strategic plan of Intesa Sanpaolo. So again, banking is not cool, circular economy is, but we believe finance has a great role in anticipating this transition. And the reason is pretty simple, and has been anticipated already. There may be some kind of issues, limits, in clearly understanding what circular economy is right now, given. However, we all understand pretty well what the linear economy is. So before asking ourselves how much profitable the new model is, are we up to the task to understand how risky the existing model is? It's a different kind of question. And we are dealing with that. We are trying to make sure that we, at the financial perspective, are able to understand how value destruction is linked to the linear economy. As been said already, a car in Europe stays parked 92% of its lifetime. But at least in Europe, we have commercials that are pushing us to go to the car dealers, even in the weekends, to buy a new car. Is this progress? And so finance has a key role in making sure the transition is not about a new sustainable kind of revolution. Sustainability, in a nutshell, it's failing. It's not by me, it's by somebody who has been at the forefront on the sustainability agenda. His name is Sir John Elkington, the father of the concept of triple bottom line. In June, in London, he said, this concept, truly important, has been somehow anticipating a much-needed transformation, which we had not been able to achieve. Why? Because sustainability, as of today, has been dealing, as an example, with a single fish. You take out this fish, you try to make it very clean, sustainable, perfect, and then what happens? You need to put the fish back into the tank. We, he said, forgot about the tank. We need to think in systematic way. Finance has to find a new way in financing businesses, looking at value creation from a systemic perspective. Nothing to do with disruption in financial industry if we do not appreciate how this should be since the beginning. And again, a sort of good provocation since the beginning. Impact investing, strong, important, fundamental concept. But what we are implicitly saying is that what we do today is negative impact. So positive impact actually should lead somebody to finance a project which is able to demonstrate that is producing a benefit from an economic, environmental, and social dimension, which implies that today this is not the case. Is this the way forward, or should be the other way around? We should delegitimate who is not able to make a positive impact to finance. So again, positive concept, excellent position, but finance industry has a great potential, of course, with the recommendations from the policymakers and the regulators to make sure that the circular economy is not the latest trend in sustainability, is industrial policy agenda. And in order for this agenda to be implemented, a new cultural mindset is needed. We need to eradicate the concept of waste from our culture. And I'm closing. When I do say that we are the financial service global partner of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, I'm saying so because Ellen MacArthur is an amazing figure. She has been the first woman solo sailing around the world, setting the record. But then she understood a very simple concept. Nature is circular. Why the economy has to be linear? And so circular economy, if I can leave you with the concept, is not about trash. It's about how you decouple economic and social development from the exploitation of finite natural resources. Nothing less than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we actually now get this film, or is it possible to kind of load this film now to the okay?
The next one.
Today, a car remains parked for 92% of its lifetime. Offices and workplaces are used less than 50% of their good time. More than 30% of food production is wasted along the supply chain. We can foresee a future where by 2050, global population will grow by more than 2 billion. And in the oceans, there will be more plastic than fish by volume. We need to redesign existing products and industrial ecosystems, switching to an alternative model that decouples economic development from the exploitation of finite natural resources. Today, thanks to the activities of our Innovation Centre, we are ready to meet the challenges of circular economy, which is a new paradigm for economic and social development, restorative and regenerative by design. Since 2015, we're the only financial services global partner of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the most relevant player promoting the transition towards the circular economy. We're exploring new business applications in collaboration with our partners. Finance plays a key role in supporting investments for the transformation of current linear business models into circular ones by rethinking the approach to risk and value creation. That's why a circular economy for us is a matter of strategic innovation, not just sustainability. This is an amazing collective journey. Welcome on board.
Okay, thank you. I think we are on board, at least in the, in this room. Can I actually? I mean, I understood that your financial institution is a commercial bank. So can I actually kind of take this thinking a bit further in your banking operations? I mean, where does this then lead? What you are doing? Are you basically aiming at phasing out some type of investments, because as you argued, some of the linear investments are maybe more risky than we understand because they are going to be phased out, and maybe banks should not put money in such operations? And are you phasing in some kind of investments? I mean, how do you see this strategically then be made operational, if you like, in your financial institution?
I have just one slide which depicts how we are working, which is basically this one, if we can. And so again, as just been anticipated, we as a commercial banking, we have been designing, putting ahead in the strategic plan of Intesa Sanpaolo 2018-2021, 5 billion euros credit facility. It's money, it's not just talk. We are talking about 5 billion euros that we want to make sure are going to be financing circular business models transformations. Those are the 5 criteria that we have been identifying just thanks to the amazing work done with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation team, so that in Italy, at least, and of course also with international clients, when we do look at the transaction, we just first look at the circular economy transformative potential that those business models may have. Once this is met as a criteria, then we have a potential for allocating the best commercial conditions on the market to make sure that this becomes a very successful transaction. And this is just the initiative that we've been launched. We have been launching this on the 24th of September. And again, sorry, we open what is the Circular Economy Lab in Italy. You will see there is Ellen MacArthur. We open what we do believe it's a hotspot. Italy is up to become one of the hotspots in the circular economy. You may not know the name, but Novamont is the leader in the bioeconomy, is a company in which actually our institution has been investing over the last 20 years. Today, this company is a global leader. They just inaugurated the latest new plant in Italy, in the south of Italy, on Friday. Italy is up to the task of changing its industrial model. Of course, we want to support this transition. So we have instrument, the Circular Economy Lab, the Credit Plafond, and now we are launching what we do call a Circular Economy Investment Fund. We want to make sure that we are not just supporting them through debit, we want to have credit and equity also playing its role. And so again, evaluation in companies need to take into account, by definition, what economic, environmental, and social benefits a single company can make so that we can invest into them. So those are concrete actions, not just talks. Thanks.
So thank you. I think we will follow with interest how this is going to be successful, and all the Italian businessmen here queuing to get the financing from this facility. And maybe others as well, because I think International Global Bank is not only focusing on Italy. Okay, now we have basically heard everybody's interventions, with few questions, a wealth of angles to this whole topic. What I actually would want now to do is to pose a couple of questions to all of you, actually, and just to kind of in simple terms, from 2 angles. So first of all, I mean, maybe now you can kind of start. I mean, what should actually public sector, particularly policymakers and businesses, to do to attract more financing, to be more credible? I think we have heard something, but maybe you could kind of try to give your kind of a take on what you have heard also now. And I actually have lost one microphone. I think it was Mika who stole. No, it's okay. But okay, we will be able to manage, okay?
Right. I may want to say two different things. And from public policy point of view, I think I mentioned the importance of a regulation to create the market, send a clear policy signal, which is important to the long-term investors. So definitely, it's not anything new point at all, but I think it's very, very important to ensure that any kind of the investment condition environment really needs to be, to be supported by government regulation, policy and regulation. But the second point I want to make is that just think about how the public money like the GF has been actually helping or trying to play the role in this space. And I think that the public money can actually help to address the few questions when we need to transform the economic system. Based on my own example, that the de-risking is definitely one, and actually that creating a actually the aggregating the small investment here and there is second thing. But the third one is the capacity building for that, particularly the new investors, the community investors, and those kind of people who really need to have some kind of help to augment the capacity. And actually, in terms of the social investment, I have seen not necessarily always circular economy space, but for nature space, there are so many willingness for impact investor to come in, but they are all stuck of those issues of small size, that the capacity issue and the aggregation issue. So that one good thing which I have seen for the last year or so is that those financial social investors, institutional investors, and foundation, and us to come together to create a coalition. We call it the CPIC. It's the Coalition for Private Sector Investment in Conservation. And the idea is to that how those people from different sector to come together to actually overcome those challenges that a small social investment may actually encounter. So that this coalition is actually to create a few blueprint so that not all, each of the investors have to struggle the same issue of the capacity and the size and then aggregation issue, so that we have agreed to create the blueprint for coastal fishery, that agroforestry and land issue and water issue. So this is just one example that private investment, social investors and public money like us, that we consider ourselves as a venture capital for nature, so that we come together with philanthropy to create the platform to address those the common challenge. And I see that the same kind of maybe initiative could be also helpful to address some of the circular economy investment. Not all of them, but some of those issues could be maybe addressed by creating those kind of coalition. So.
Thank you, Naoko. I think from you, this issue of the platforms, kind of a grouping the actors, and maybe that's something that is worth looking at. Pension funds, insurance companies, any even commercial banks,
Actually, no, that I should have mentioned that those and the social investors, actually, who is behind those people is exactly this pension fund that the institutional investors who are kind of willing capital, but looking for the platform because each of the social investment is so small, so there is a demand and there is a supply, but there are actually somebody need to create that platform to link up those and the supply and the demand, and this platform is actually trying to play that bonding issue.
Thank you, Naoko. And then perhaps Mika, you don't need to have to sing if you don't want, but just what's your take on this? What should happen with the policy and businesses to make them more attractive?
I think that a lot of very important things has been already touched and said, so I don't know if I have anything to know, but I really believe on co-creation, idea of co-creation, that we should have different stakeholders, different people with different background at the same table at the same time to talk about the joint vision and measurable goals. Because as I already mentioned, that it's bothering me always that here we are talking about circular economy, and there's people in the other conference who are talking about well-being and sustainable development and global future. Little bit different terms, but in fact about same issues. And so somehow we can create always that kind of segments, despite that we are talking about our joint global future. So again, I come back to the idea that we really have to build up that kind of more strong coalition, and coalition which have people from very different backgrounds. And then it's possible to really create that kind of joint vision and everything what is needed, that all efforts are going to the same direction. And I come back to the investors, talking about investors and if they believe in this kind of things or not, that in Finland we are using the word modeling in order to build a case in terms of from different perspectives. And that means that we all have to have a joint understanding about, for example, what circular economy means. In this room, of course, I think that we all have some kind of agreement what that means, but there are a lot of people who really would like to jump in, but they don't know exactly what that means. So we really should create that kind of more joint understanding about this kind of joint challenges and possibilities in terms of our global world. And one more thing that somebody has said, that mentioned very many times, that social investments, maybe it's a question of Finnish language, but it's always struggling again the social word, because sometimes it gives the feeling that this is something soft and this is not the real world and this is not the hard business. I don't know what would be the better term in instead of social. I don't know, future investments or something.
Thank you, Mika. So make a business case. I think that's what you are really after. And Rintaro, your take.
Listening to the two previous speakers, I want to add, in line with what they talked about, the collaboration of stakeholders. First, in policy making, Naoko mentioned to create the markets. To create markets for circular economy, we need perhaps some regulations, but also we need taxation, charges, subsidies. Why we are missing here the finance ministry? This symposium is supported by Ministry of Environment, but our finance ministry should play more important role than they are playing now. This is one thing. Secondly, two people referred to the capacity. In terms of capacity, of course, some circular economy projects are too big for small investors, and some projects are too small for large institutional investors. So we have to make an aggregation, a collective body of collective body of projects and collective body joint venture by institutional investors. And also we have to look at the capacity of evaluating the risks and creating the project, viable projects. We have to feed the social ventures that can be explained as economic jargons, economic terms, to convince potential investors to believe that these projects are commercially, at least in the long run, viable. And also from the investor side, they have to be capable of evaluating new types of risks. They are trained just looking at conventional financial products in the financial markets, bonds, stocks, real properties. Those conventional properties, they can evaluate the risks. But in this case, Veronica's projects cannot be evaluated in such a way. So investor side should have the capacity, new capacity, to evaluate what is an implication of this project for their clients or their long-term investment return.
Thank you, and then Veronica.
Well, I'm not sure if there's much more to add, but what I would say is, if we want to change the basis of our economy from a linear model to a circular one, we better think outside of the box, because either way, we're not going to make it. And I'm going to quote one of Triciclo's mentors here, which is William McDonough, from the US. And I think that what we should do is agree on certain values, not necessarily value, but our values. Meaning, we want to preserve our existence in this planet, and we want to respect nature, and we want to respect each other. And once we define what that actually means in terms of our economy, then the strategies, the objectives, and the plans, and the business models, and the value creation will appear very naturally. So I don't know if I went too up high, but I think that once we agree on our values, we can actually change our system.
So system approach, really, that you. And Massimiliano, do you have a?
I think that from what has been said, a key part of a conversation about circular and finance has to rely on risk. From our perspective, a linear company is going to remain much more risky than a circular one. Why? Because if finite natural resources are finite, and companies still depend on business models, digging and employing, amounting, an exponentially growing amount of resources, those business models will face important consequences in terms of risk. So, natural resources going down as availability, demand going up, it's not even sustainable from an industrial perspective. It's about risk. We need to price adequately risk, which is important, but we, Intesa, we see it with other players like Enel, the giant multi-utility company in Italy. We do see it within the group of the expert to the European Commission advising for the circular economy financing, and the debate is about, do we need subsidies for circular economy in Europe? The answer is still unknown, but I ask you to consider one aspect. First of all, companies realizing themselves what does imply for them to transform their business model into circular one, they should realize how much incentive internally they have, because they are regaining value from what basically they trash, first. Second, and again, trying to think about provocatively, we are talking about financing circular economy, But public money today is spent to fund $5.3 trillion oil and gas subsidies on a year basis. Ladies and gentlemen, what are we talking about?
So even creating a level playing field would help. So I think, I mean, there's no microphone, but if there's a couple of questions, I can kind of take and speak loud if you can, and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Chris White from a company called Use It in South Africa. I can run the mic.
Oh yeah, yes, please.
Thank you. My name's Chris White. I'm from a company called Use It in South Africa. Financing the circular economy is quite a big issue, and I think a lot of what we've been talking about today is the big economies. We tend to be a little bit forgotten down south. I think South African economy is about 0.3% of the global economy. If you add maybe a couple of other countries like Nigeria and Egypt, we might get up to like 0.5%. So we tend to be the forgotten cousins. And I think the issue that we're looking at is that we're seeing a lot of development in terms of circularity in the developed world, really coming through largely by attrition and in terms of the education of the public. The biggest problem is that the poverty areas, if you look at marine pollution, most of that pollution is coming from Africa and Asia, areas where we have massive poverty issues, areas where we have massive problems in terms of financing anything. We're battling to finance housing and get the waste infrastructure sorted out before we even start looking at circularity. So we're going to be the big bugbear in the room, because Africa and Asia is going to be the mass growth of your population and your pollution and your consumerism growing into the future. And we need to look at those areas as well. How do we finance those? It's not, you know, we can all finance Unilever because there's a low risk. How do we look at the smaller issues? How do we look at the smaller countries, the developing countries, and finance those? There's a lot of good innovation there, and we need to try and unpack that.
Thank you. Pertinent question. I think maybe Naoko, you would be best placed to try to react. I remember in the opening statement you made a rather bold statement that first of all there's something about developing world which can kind of bypass some of the paths that were done in the developed world. But please, could you actually try to respond to that pertinent question?
Very good question. Well, one happy news is that when I open up this the GF to be open to the circular economy kind of thing, that there is a huge demand actually coming from Africa and actually Asia, that mostly South and Southeast Asia, so that they actually see, I think, that the needs for them to actually to address that issue. At the same time, from their mind, maybe that issue is very much linked to also the poverty and the development issue. So that as far as we were able to see their challenge and opportunity together, and the circular economy, in my view, should be also able to provide a solution to not only just, how could I say, to move on from linear to circular, but it should also that address their immediate needs of the sustainable development. And when we discuss the issue of that e-waste or that the agriculture issue, that just actually sustainable city issues, it seems to me that there is a lot of good lessons and opportunities we can address. And I'm so happily surprised, for instance, in Kigali, Rwanda, the major request coming from is actually sustainable cities. Why is that? Because they see a lot of opportunity by doing the cities right. They can actually address a lot of linear economy model to make it circular. So that the challenge is also on our mind, that we need to really have a good vision that how we could help that each countries that who are trying to do movement from linear to circular, but also at the same time address this immediate need of the sustainable and the development. I think that it's also a challenge to us, but I'm quite enthusiastic and quite how can I say, pleased that that issue is kind of, very widely raised by African government and business people, so that we were quite ready to even to discuss maybe in case of your own government, own country.
I think it's rather, in a sense, optimistic, or at least you are telling that there's a demand. If there would be an Indian friend of mine here, I don't think that he's here, so he would actually start immediately arguing that the Indian economy is, by definition, circular. And of course, they don't really need to move to linear too much, because of course, the challenge is, I think we do have a couple of further, maybe you and then back there, and that's it. I mean, we need to finish.
The circular economy is not going to stay circular for very long unless it's also inclusive. Half the population of the world, as our friend from South Africa just mentioned, is outside that economy, whether it's circular or linear. The answers, the solutions to what we're searching for are largely going to be based on renewables, decentralized resources, and decentralized initiatives. Decentralized means small scale. Frankly, the financing system of this world is completely immune to the needs of that section, which can solve the real problems. Micro, yes, the individual housewife who wants to create a little small micro industry, yes, she can get money. Microcredit is available. Large scale, you talk about Unilever, you talk about big companies, yes, they can get any amount of money. But the people who are going to actually solve the problem, the small and medium enterprises, the ones that cluster the micro and bring together the kinds of innovative solutions that are needed, no way. I have personally been trying for 10 years to raise finance, and it's not possible. There's just no imagination about the people who got left behind and about what can solve their problems.
So thank you, Ashok, and of course from India. So I think final intervention from back there.
Thank you. Alan Young with the Circular Economy Leadership Coalition in Canada. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was really a broad range of the questions and potential instruments we have to deal with. And we're talking about creating demand, we're talking about sending market signals and what governments can do. We've talked about wiping out subsidies, but I'm curious about what your opinion as experts is about the role of government procurement policies in driving change, because, I mean, if governments are, it's a form of subsidy. If you're buying old linear materials and services and you're not buying new stuff, that's billions of dollars directed to the old economy. And I was interested that that wasn't brought up once in this panel, and I'm wondering if it's because there are inherent flaws, obstacles, or inefficiencies in government procurement, or whether that is in fact something that would be viewed by the finance sector as an important signal and tool. And if you could just comment on the relevance of these kind of procurement policies. I mean, it could be governments, but it could also be major companies like Unilever's and Ikea's. Where are they buying their stuff? Is that important? And how can we enable that if it is important?
Timo, may I start? Maybe it's due to my bad English that I didn't say that clear enough, that we really believe on government's role in order to make that kind of changes. That means new kind of procurement processes and everything. And when I was talking about outcome-based approach, I was in fact talking about new kind of governmental actions. And Finland is going to have an EU presidency during the second part of next year, and outcome-based approach will be included to our agenda. We really believe that we can make that kind of major changes by doing that.
Thank you, Mika. And of course, I mean, there were several references on legislative and regulatory requirements. Perhaps public procurement, as important as it is a driver for creating a market, which then allows the financing. Well, I'm afraid that we are running out of time, and I actually would want to first of all thank the panelists and not really trying to conclude too much, but in a sense it has been a wealth of the discussion. I get the feeling that the financing world in general, maybe not so much yet the mainstream financing world, but in a sense, in many angles, is kind of geared up to the financing of a circular economy, which basically is a business case, really, by definition. And of course, that is important for financing. Well, there's some lack of understanding and knowledge. And of course, I also perhaps would want to finish by South African and Indian intervention, that there are kind of a huge needs out there which are where the present financing system seem to be blind. Of course, I mean, those who are left behind, and of course equity-related issues, of course that is perhaps a topic for further discussion, but nevertheless I think it's important to take note on that in this discussion, that the financing world kind of doesn't seem that to be an important, many small rather than big ones. Let's give a hand to the panelists, because I think it has been a good discussion. And thank you for participating in this session. Thank you for the panelists, and I think the discussion will continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much.